And I'll tap that.
Does that look all right?
Yeah, it looks fine.
I feel like I've got like a crop top on.
Yeah, you said that in the last video. You can do me a favour. Go to that one and then tap the focus so that it stays on my face, if you wouldn't mind.
Yeah.
Do you watch Joe Rogan podcast?
I used to, not so much now.
Do you know that guy that he's got called Jamie?
Oh yeah, Jamie just looks up everyone.
Yeah, he looks up everyone and sets everything up. I think we need a Jamie.
Just get Tommy to come and do it. Or Piers. He'd probably fuck it up, wouldn't he? Oh, Tommy, just fact check this for me a little bit.
Guess like, completely wrong. Yeah. Anyway, I hope this. Yeah, I guess we should probably start going then. I think everything's recording, which is good.
Did you before we actually get into it? What was New Year's like in the end at Brad's?
Yeah, it was good. So yeah, I had to leave a bit earlier, didn't I?
New Year?
Oh, New Year. Sorry, I was thinking of the 29th because I saw you on the 29th. New Year. Yeah, so we stayed up, saw the fireworks, which is very underwhelming. Actually, no, it's quite mad how much they spend.
Yeah. Was it the London one?
It's the London one, yeah.
Katie's in Singapore. Did you see her story?
I saw it. It looked mental.
What how much money like countries just waste on like seeing the New Year's?
You think where that other money could be
I know.
put, I know. You just think, it's mental. I think traditions in general, like that's obviously a big tradition, isn't it? We get a big scene on New Year's, and when you genuinely when I think to traditions, like me and Sophie were talking the other day, just how mad it is that it has latched on. And it's normal for a human being to put a tree in their living room and then decorate it. All for when you actually look at it, it's actually like a bit of a mental illness.
It's but then the social expectation of everything that comes with it. Like Saf was just like, oh, look how nice that house is. Oh, this is pathetic. And I'm like, Saf, you're a baby. I'm not going up on the gutter and putting all these lights and stuff. And she's like, oh, Max would love it. I was like, Max is 12 weeks old. He's a potato still. Because she's like, yeah, but he loves the lights. And I'm like, not on our gutter. And I'm like, it's not worth the investment. I know.
Yeah, so I did that. We actually played a really, really good game, which I think I might ask you a question about it at the end of this video.
All right, okay.
I think that's quite a nice segue into the start of this podcast and how we're going to set it up. So, hello everyone, welcome. We've got 3 cameras filming. I apologise for that one. It's a very old iPhone, so it looks like it's being filmed on a potato. So, if you are going to talk, just talk into either that one or that one. If you need to explain something to the audience, if we get an audience, hopefully we do.
My mum.
My mum. Hope my mum doesn't watch this actually. We're going to start the video with a confessions sock. We were going to have a box, but we thought we'd start with a sock because, well, we didn't really have a box. So we're going to start with the confessions, which some of them are quite deep. Some of them are quite, what's the word?
I don't know. To give perspective, like the confession sock or box or whatever it's going to turn into is every confession that I've written. So me and Dan have like written down some confessions and everyone that I've done, I'm not sure about Dan, because I don't know his, he doesn't know mine. Every confession I've written, I've never really spoken about. So it's like it's a very, and some of them I hope I don't even pull out.
I'll see.
But they're pretty raw confessions from whenever we've done them. So we're going to start the beginning of the podcast with like a confession, explain it, unpack it a little bit before we progress. So
and then I think that the podcast will just naturally then go into a conversation about fitness.
Yeah.
And then eventually we want to get some questions from the members, which we're going to run on Instagram. We haven't managed to do that for this session, so I guess we'll skip that. So this podcast will probably be a little bit shorter than the other ones, I guess.
Intro.
And then we're going to close with a random question.
Cool.
And I've already got mine for you.
All right, nice.
Today. And I will probably close off like that then.
Cool.
So do you want to...
I'll pull it out and it'll either be mine or yours, right?
Yeah.
Based on how it is.
Yeah. So some of these are going to be quite deep. Some of them are going to be quite, I guess, well, mine are anyway.
All right, fine. So I'll see if this is mine or yours. So when I said that, I hope I don't pull some of them out, I've actually pulled out the first one, which is mine. So the confession is, I'm going to preface this by saying I was like 21, 22, but it's my first steroid cycle was from a plasterer.
No.
Which is actually tragic. But yeah, let's say that back in the day, there wasn't much information and resources on steroids and stuff. And I was influenced by, remember Rich Piana?
Yeah, rest in peace.
Rest in peace.
Yeah, yeah.
Rich Piana. And like, I was following like some untested powerlifters and I was like, oh, I just want to be massive. And I was naive, immature, arrogant, still the same now, but more so back then. Anyway, this guy that was at David Lloyd where I was working was like, do you take steroids? And I was like, no. And he was just like,
wait, just randomly came up to you?
Like, he just said, you're lifting weights. And I was like, yeah. He's like, you taking steroids? And I was like, no. And he was just like, why not? And I was like, whoa, like what? Like, what do you mean, why not? And anyway, we had this conversation. And he was just like, oh, you should. If you're serious about getting like big and strong, you should. Anyway, like I was on YouTube then looking and saw Rich Piana, and on one of his videos on his channel, he was saying how much gains he got from his first like steroid cycle. And he was like, I took Test, I took Deca, and I put on 45 pounds, it's like 20 kilos. Right. And I was like 70 kilos back then. I was like soaking wet, like it was like untrained. And I was like, 20 kilos, I've been 90 kilos in like 12 weeks. I was like, oh my God. So I messaged him and I was just like, can you get it for me? And he was just like, yeah, what do you want? And I was just like, what? Rich Piana said. And I told him, and he was just like, yeah, that's pretty standard. People do that. He's like, I can get that for you.
Responsible of it.
Mental, right? So I like, bear in mind, right? All I knew was Rich Piana took it. He put on 20 kilos. I wanted to gain weight. I was like, sounds like a good idea. Nothing else. I knew nothing else. No implications on sides, how to do it, anything like that. So anyway, he gets it for me. He gets me 1 vial of Test, 1 vial of Deca, right? I was like, how do I do it? He's like, you inject it. And I was like, oh, can I not just take a tablet? Like standard questions that everyone used to say. And he was just like, no. So I was like, how much do I take? He was just like, take 1 mil in one shoulder, 1 mil in another shoulder, do that twice a week. That's like that amount that he told me to take is obscene. Like that's a lot for someone
how old were you as well?
I was like 21, 22.
Wow.
I reckon it was like at least 10 years ago. I've been powerlifting for 10, maybe longer than that because I've been powerlifting for 10 years. And my first couple of years into powerlifting was all through drug tested stuff. So like, yeah, it would be over 10 years ago. I've been in my early 20s, which is like, for me, far too young. I was mentally not mature enough to be even considering it, but here we are. So anyway, he gave me this stuff. I was living in Penarth with Adam Tossell. And I told him, and he was like, bro, like, I don't think you should be doing this. But I was like, mate, Rich Piana, like 20 kilos. Like, that's unreal. I was like, how mad is it going to be? And to be so strong. I was so keen. I wrote like a diary of all my training and stuff. And I got all the stuff from the needle exchange in Boots. Told them they just give you needles.
You openly told them like, this is what I'm going to do.
Yeah,
and they were fine.
Yeah, like there's like needle exchanges that they have to like support people that take like heroin and stuff to make them not share needles and stuff. So there's a couple of them dotted around. So I went there, picked up some needles. Anyway, drew it up, and I was like, oh, like the needles were like this. I was like naive, young. Anyway, I put it in my shoulder, and I was just like, and Adam was like, oh my God, and I was like, oh my God, he injected it.
It's ballsy.
I mean, it was
really ballsy mental. At that age.
100%, 100%. Took it out, squirted out of my blood, squirted out of my shoulder, started dripping down my arm.
Because you hit a vein?
I must have clipped the vein or something like that.
Oh
and God. I was like, oh my God. Adam was like, oh bro, you need to stop. And I was just like, oh, I don't know what to do now. I was like, whatever. Yeah, so then I was like, doing the other one. I was like, it's like this, trembling. But yeah, like, luckily I survived and it didn't like do anything. I finished those like 2 little vials. Definitely didn't get 20 kilos of gains.
Oh no.
It was quite underwhelming. Yeah. And I was like,
why do you think that was? Gutted. Because obviously a lot of people take. Yeah, and I guess it's probably quite a nice subject that we can go on to in a bit. But why do you think that was, that you didn't make those gains out of the block when some people, you go on bloody TikTok, Instagram nowadays, and you see these guys who are, pretty young.
Yeah.
And they're exploding.
I think it could be a couple of things. It could have been pretty shit gear. It could have just like not been as good as like legit pure Test and Deca. I was young. I was 21. Like hormonally, I'm already in like a really advantaged position then. I don't even think you should be considering stuff like that. Like young, even early 20s. I feel like my like hormonal profile was probably already in a good position, and then taking maybe like bunk gear or, you know, just chucking some other stuff in wasn't like that beneficial. My training was like CrossFitty. So it's not really conducive to putting 20 kilos on. Just not going to take stuff and rely on it to do all the work for you. So I think there's like multiple factors. I can't remember what I was doing like properly back then. But it's definitely like, you know, moved on a lot more now in terms of like what people are taking and what people are doing. Obviously, like, you know, the stuff that people are doing now is very conducive to like the goals and the outcomes. There's still people that are doing, you know, making silly decisions with this sort of stuff. But I think we're quite lucky now that there's like a lot of experts in the space that are on like Instagram and stuff that give free resources that are actually quite helpful. And yeah, I feel like people are just a little bit more in tune with like what they should and shouldn't be doing.
Do you think there's pressure on men to look a certain way, which is why we have seen a bit of an explosion of steroid use, especially in the UK?
Yeah,
it's quite rife, isn't it?
Yeah, I think so. I think like it's like the pressure of social media is always going to be a thing. You know, and I'm sure like we'll talk about this more and more. But I think definitely like younger generations of people will have like, you know, we'll do things like be like, oh, you're lifting for the gram and doing this for the gram. People take the piss out of it, but I think it's genuinely true. Mm-hmm. Sometimes I find myself like, I'll like want to record something and I'll be like, oh, this will be sick for Instagram. It's like such a weird attitude to have. Like, why the hell do I care? It's like what we spoke about the other day, like with that book, The Power of Now, and like just sort of fueling your ego a little bit, you know. It's just like, that is like ego, you know. I want to do it for a little bit of promotion for like my business,
which
and whatnot.
Is understandable.
100%.
Yeah.
But then there's also like, is it just pure vanity and pure ego? You know, why I'm trying to like film this and do this for the gram. But to answer the question, I think like there is pressure from Instagram. I think people like quite unrealistic with like people's condition. Like someone will see like a guy like Sebum and they'll be like, he's in unreal shape. Like one, he's like the genetic potential of like 0.0001% of people can look like him, you know, regardless of their lifestyle and what they take and how they, you know, construct their training. But also I think people will also see people in a condition and think that they hold that condition all year round. Yeah. And it's like, that's unrealistic. They don't hold that condition all year round. That's just like a snippet in time where they've like either like cut or they've done something to allow them to reach this condition for like a photo shoot, to be on stage and stuff. And people won't have the knowledge to understand like the process that they've gone through and how that is just like a snapshot in time. And they think they hold that condition all year round. And then they're like, well, I look shit comparable to so-and-so, you know? And
that's, I think, the same as well for strength sport as well.
Yeah.
Like, as we both know, you peak towards a competition.
Yeah.
For someone who, say, can deadlift 300 kg, you're not just going into the gym and doing 300 kg all the time. You specifically get strong for that moment.
Exactly.
And then it's a case of like, okay, my body is so taxed at that time.
Yeah.
In another week, if I go in and try and do that again after comp, I'm probably not going to pull
100%. Is that understanding of like, you know, when you're training, you're inducing fatigue. You're not your strongest like right now. You're basically getting banked strength for when you need to deadlift 300 kilos. So you're accumulating a load of fatigue. You're building a load of volume. So then when you dissipate that fatigue, you can do 300 kilos, assuming that's the top end.
Yeah.
And yeah, people are like, I can't deadlift, you know, close to 300 kilos. And I've done that way. I'm weaker. It's like, no, the circumstance, the phase of training, your current training is not conducive you to be expressing that. And also, why do you need to? Mm-hmm. You don't need to right now. Like competitions don't just, or like max out sessions don't just crop up and you can be like, oh, I'm going to max out today. You know, it's like actually my competition's in May, so I need to be strong in May. I don't need to be showcasing that strength right now, you know?
Very true.
But yeah, what do you think? Do you think the pressure from people to look a certain way is like rife?
Again, I think it's, I think as you get old, I think when you're young, there's definitely an element of, I need to look a certain way. And I think that comes down to where you're at in life. When you get married, once you find a partner and you're content with that partner, I think you stop, and I think it comes with maturity as well. I think you stop caring about what you look like for other people, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
But then I think as a caveat to that, there's also an element of, because I've been in shape before, it's almost like I've ticked it off. I've done a photo shoot. I've got there, and I assume you have as well, because you're always in great nick.
Thanks, mate.
Sorry, mate. And I think sometimes the men, especially, it could be women too, but we've all got like this itch that we want to scratch. Where I want to be lean at least once in my life, just because it's like I want to be able to say that I've done it. Because it is. I think it's. I saw a statistic the other day. I think it was in America there are more millionaires than there are men who have got a six pack.
No way.
Yeah.
Genuine.
I saw the statistic somewhere. I don't know where they've got that statistic from.
Jamie, fact check that for me. Yeah. That's wild.
Yeah. So I saw that and I was like, oh, whoa, it's really rare then to have to be in good shape. I think it's and I think it's with say wealth, you can almost not buy wealth, but you can have people who can help you raise money, and if you've got a good idea.
Yeah, for sure.
And there's hard work in that, obviously, but I think when it comes to having a physique that looks impressive, there's no shortcuts at the moment. Okay, you can take anabolic steroids, but still, even then, that you still have to work really hard. You still have to be prepping your meals. You still have to be turning up to train. Like, no one can do it for you yet. We've obviously got Ozempic. Is that the brand of the fat loss, the weight loss drug? Again, we've probably got opinions on that, which we'll probably talk about in another episode, but. Yeah, I think that there is still that pressure, especially now with social media. But again, it's just making sure that people have got realistic expectations.
Yeah.
And this stuff isn't like you're not going to get a great physique doing like an 8-week shred.
Yeah.
But it's going to take time depending on where you're at. Especially guys who I work with, skinny fat men who ultimately are in terrible nick, and they know that. And that's comes down to a lot of things. Hormonally, they've just not been blessed with great genetics. They've just not abused themselves over the years, but they've just not necessarily taken care of their body. So they're starting in a much worse place than someone else. It doesn't mean that it's impossible. It just means that it's going to take a little bit longer. That's all.
Yeah.
So that's my take on it. And again, I wanted to touch on something that you mentioned there about steroids. And it was a question that I asked you when we were over at our friend's house over Christmas, and you started answering, and I said, oh, wait, hold that. Let's save it for the podcast. And that was, do you think that the fitness industry, I can't remember what I exactly said, but do you think that they underplay the health risks of steroids?
I can't remember answering that question. We're starting to answer that question.
Yeah, you obviously weren't fucking listening then, were you? Cheers, mate. You actually said, that's a really good question.
That's normally what I say when I want to palm it off. Yeah. So I think they underplay it. I think there's I reckon there's probably just two camps. There's probably just the conservative camp and the aggressive camp.
What do you mean by that?
So like a conservative camp, the people that are sort of like very risk averse, they'll be like, you can get loads of these like side effects. And I think people will use it as like almost like marketing. So there's a page on Instagram that I follow that always brings up like the negative side of of steroids, and highlights certain side effects and how it can like ruin relationships, and like they can like men really like clinically depressed, and all of the other like aesthetic side effects as well, like gyno, acne, and all the stuff that we know from using PDs. And like they use that as a way of like, if you don't have the right guidance, this could happen to you. Buy my handbook and then you can prevent this. So like those guys like really highlight and showcase it, which is good. They're making people aware of it. Then on the aggressive side, people then will either market or showcase stuff in a more positive light and be like, these are the results that I've made from taking, 10 weeks of these drugs or whatever. And maybe say like, oh, this is like the strength of this person's yield and coaching them with my supplement protocol and stuff. So like, I feel like I don't really feel like social media, and just generally, I just don't think people will really highlight the risks and make it really acceptable or unacceptable. I feel like it's getting to a very healthy place now where it's relatively neutral. I feel like there's like information that you can find that is going to be sort of like pro it and not pro it, expose you to like potential side effects and the potential benefits. And I feel like it's just more than up to the individual to navigate through the weeds, and also just make a sort of like a moral decision for themselves. Like I'm never going to judge people to use stuff I'm not going to encourage it, discourage it. I'm going to be quite neutral, because the people that should be taking there are adults, and they can form their own decision of what they want to do, like with anything in life, recreational drugs, alcohol, food, like anything. And I feel like social media and there's enough people doing enough research within the space now to give like just neutral information. So you can pretty much find everything now. It's quite lucky.
So let's paint two hypothetical examples. Let's say there's a 35-year-old man that comes up to you in the gym looking for advice. Okay, he's tried everything. He's tried all the diets, tried losing fat, tried building muscle.
Yeah.
And he feels a little bit stuck. And he says, Jordan, I wanna potentially hop on steroids.
Yeah.
What advice would you give that person in comparison to maybe, say, a 21-year-old who'd come into the gym and ask you a similar question?
So a 35-year-old, you're going to assume they got their like life in check, or they're a little bit more settled.
You'd hope so.
I know, I say that, you'd hope.
Yeah.
Let's assume hypothetically this person's married, got a stable job, he's got his own house, whatever.
He's got kids.
So he's got kids. Right? Yeah. He's got all these things. So we can establish that he's relatively stable. I would be skeptical when they say I've tried everything and it hasn't worked. It's like, well, we offer good services at Zero.
Shameless plug.
Yeah. zeroweakness.co.uk, 0_Wales at Instagram.
There's the ad.
I feel like if they were to, get a little bit more support, professional support from people that know what they're doing with nutrition, with training, with just like movement and stuff, they'd be able to make progress. I've made it very clear on my Instagram, I don't believe in plateaus. I don't feel in like stagnation. It's just like what you're doing isn't working because you haven't broken adaptation to allow you to progress, right? But if put all that to one side and to answer the sort of crux of the question, I always tell people to just get their blood work done. And just be like, get your blood work done and see like where you are like hormonally. There's people that have sort of like, thrown that question where I've put that answer to them and they've been like clinically low testosterone, right? And they've run like clinical TRT now from a doctor. They've gone to their GP, got blood work and had it followed up, and now they're on TRT. And that was enough for them to be in a more advantageous hormonal position. So then when they looked after all of the other variables, then with nutrition and training, they're able to get better results because they're able to, right? Your body's in a position to adapt to it. But if we're looking more like steroids, I'm he's an adult, he can do what he wants. But I'm gonna just sort of sit on the fence in a point of neutral, because people like that, they're gonna make a decision. They've made the decision already.
They're looking for
validation. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So like, I'm not gonna like validate anything or do anything. I'm just gonna put it back onto them and just be like, well, what do you want to do? What is it gonna bring you? Is it gonna be worth it? Have you thought it through enough to understand that the commitment it requires? Financially, injecting, whatever. Are you able to do that? Are you able to do that consistently? If you've been inconsistent with your diet, chances are you're not going to be consistent with this sort of stuff. And I just sort of give them these like scenarios where they can actually think a little bit more critically and logically, because the question generally stems from emotion. Like emotionally, they just want to look better, feel better and stuff. And they see that as like the ticket to it. Whereas if you can remove the emotion, or at least try to give them more of a logical approach and understand, okay, this is the implications it may have, or these are the steps I may have to take for like a longer term period, then it might answer the question a bit more. So my answer is always more like educational first, and understand the actual, process is going to be, and then sort of let them make that final decision.
And going back to a younger person, if you ask the same question, would your answer be the same or would it be different?
If you'd asked me that question a year ago, I would have said different, and I would have been strongly discouraging of it. Whereas now, I'd probably make it the same, but I'd highlight their current situation as if it's not.
So what's changed from a year ago?
There's a lot of I'm a powerlifting coach. I work with a lot of powerlifters and untested powerlifters, and there's a lot of like youngsters that are doing really, really well, and they are taking anabolics. And those youngsters are doing really, really well. They're like almost like breaking world records, and they're really pursuing it. And like, again, like to come back to what I said earlier, they've already made the decision. And if they've already made the decision, it comes to the point then where it's like harm reduction. rather than like trying to be like, no, 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 and just say no to it, don't take it. They're going to do it anyway. They're probably going to do it with the advice from the plasterer. Or they're going to do it with like T-Nation or bro science, or the dude that's fucking jacked down the gym that doesn't have a clue what he's on about. So at which point then do you actually dismiss it and let them do it themselves and potentially harm themselves and get the side effects that this other Instagram page is promoting with like psychological and, physical and whatever? Or do you actually hear them out, give them a scenario which potentially could give them a bit more of an insight? At 21, you're not that screwed on. When I did it, when I was 21, I was definitely not screwed on.
No.
Not screwed on enough to override the emotional change that I wanted rather than the logic. But so at that point, then I'm going to be like highlighting like the logic side to them. But then if they've made the decision to already do it, chances are they've probably asked you, they're already doing it. They just want more confirmation. And then in which case I'll probably hear them out, advise people that I know that are well educated in the space so they can actually get some support and just limit like harm essentially.
Yeah. I going back to I don't even recognize the person I was when I was 21 years old anymore.
Mate,
I look back at that person, I think like who were you? And I look at the decisions that I made in some areas of my life. I'm just like, who are you?
I know. Because I think back, man, because I bought my first property when I was 21 and I was just like, I've made it, But I just worked hard from when I left school at 18 and I didn't go to uni. I just went to full-time work and I was lucky where I had like Carlton in my corner, Dave in my corner, where they were like, save, buy a property, get on the market and all that sort of stuff.
So they were mentors.
They were like mentors. Yeah. They're like life coaches, So I was like, okay. And I literally wanted to make them proud. So I was like, I'm going to show hard work and all this stuff. So I did. And I bought my house for 21. So I was like, oh my God, I'm doing amazing. But then think back to like what I was doing at 21. I was literally like a hustler. I didn't really have like much in order. I was like working like early morning, late at night. I was just hustling. And like the decisions I made when I was 21, it's like ridiculous, way different to how I even think now. I was literally thinking purely on like, I reckon just like ego, benefit myself. That's all I wanted to do. I was like so driven.
Selfish.
Yeah.
Not thinking of other people.
So selfish. Because all I was thinking about, I want to just buy my own property. I got my own property. I got to maintain it. I'm going to make it sick. Like a flat over in Penarth Heights overlooking the bay. So I thought I was this like, I don't even want to say. I thought I was just like king, like 21-year-olds doing sports science, like doing sports science in like Cardiff Met with my peers when I was in school. I'm like, fucking look at you. Look what I got. I just shot a dickhead. Like, and yeah, like everything I did was like for myself. And I'm like, oh my God, I was like horrible. And like me being in that mindset, generally selfish, doing stuff like PEDs where, it can pretty much exaggerate that feeling. Like they say, like, it can make you like roid rage and all this sort of stuff.
Yeah.
Don't necessarily agree with that, but it can definitely like sort of like lean into that personality trait harder. So it's like, it's just not that, it just wasn't the right time to be doing anything like that. So yeah, like I feel like that age bracket is where you'd have the regret that I have listening to a plasterer who probably wanted to make like 30 quid off me and just didn't really care. Do you know what I mean?
Is roid rage a thing? Have you ever experienced it? Or like you said, is it a case of if someone is generally an angry person, steroids will exacerbate that feeling inside of them?
Pretty much, yeah.
Is that for any emotion then as well?
I would say it can go sort of both ways. It can make you a little bit more like, you take some hormones and it can throw off like the normal balance. You can be a little bit more like emotional and be a bit more like sensitive. But then if you take other drugs, then it can do the other thing and sort of like help with like, so like Trend, for example, is really well known for like that sort of rage, gives you more like training aggression. Obviously it's just like circulating in your system, which can then lead to just like overall aggression, short fuse. And if you're a bit like you're prone to sort of behaving like that, then it can highlight it. But I'm no expert, man. Like this is just purely anecdotal based on like what other people have said and seen and experienced and stuff. But yeah, I don't necessarily agree with it in its entirety, but I think aspects of it definitely exists. Yeah.
I was speaking to a friend yesterday, and we were just talking about like male aggression in general.
Yeah.
And he was saying that and I think this goes back to the testosterone levels of men generally are starting to decline.
Yeah.
Actually, if you look at a man who is in, the 1960s compared to now, on average, testosterone levels are declining.
Yeah.
That's what the research does suggest. And then we got into a conversation where he was talking about his father's parents,
right,
where they'd come home from work, and essentially, if they didn't like the food on the table, they would literally pick the plate up and like throw it against the wall, get angry. And when you think about it, if you go back, which is mental, by the way, but then if you go
is that what you do now when you come home and so cooked your dinner?
Yeah, what's this shit? Throw it. But we were just talking about how men did potentially used to be more aggressive. That being a perfect example, I think. The jobs that men used to work, being down in the coal mine all together,
yeah, I was
working,
just about to say, yeah.
They were grafters. Maybe is it a good thing or a bad thing that men are potentially not becoming more less masculine and more feminine, but it's just that we are maybe losing that element of that aggressiveness, because if you look at, so I'm of the inclination that the world's getting better, in the sense of, if you look at the statistics and you look at the data and the research, there's less wars than ever, even though we might not feel like it. Less people are killing each other, which is obviously a good thing. But then part of me sometimes thinks, is it being forced on us then to not express ourselves in the sense of our aggression, or are we now channeling that aggression into things like sports like Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, boxing, powerlifting, things like that? And is it are we trying to change our masculinity and change that aggression, and is it changing us as a species? I know this is quite a deep question.
That's really deep, and it's like how far back do you want to go as well? Because like, this is mental, right? But I watch some really weird videos on YouTube. Like, I don't watch TV, but I watch weird videos on YouTube. Going on to like golf videos, and I watch loads of just people playing golf. But at the minute, there's this channel, it's called like What If? And he just gives loads of hypothetical like situations, like what if you were, like walked around on Venus or something like that. And he just creates this like AI simulation of what would happen. And it's really weird. I'm gonna I'll send it to you.
Yeah, that sounds interesting.
Off air.
Yeah.
So it's really mental. But anyway, so it gave me suggested videos, and it was like about Neanderthals. And me and you like enjoy *Sapiens*. We love that book. It's my favorite book. And it was basically just unpacking like Neanderthals and like the biological change from like a Homo sapien to a Neanderthal, right? And like how they were like generally like shorter than us. I think the biggest Neanderthal was 5'10" ever recorded. And Jamie, you can fact check that, but I don't want to start saying facts as well and get it wrong. But I'm pretty sure 5'10" was the like tallest Neanderthal they've got. And like the structure of their body was just like wider rib cage, like obviously bigger nasal cavities, help with their lung capacity. I think it was like the average Neanderthal had like a lung capacity that was like 15% more than the recorded Olympian right now, which is a rower. Mental, right? So they were almost like an advanced species to like Homo sapiens in certain ways, right? And they were saying about like their muscle mass, and they were saying about like they think that their hormonal production was greater than ours.
Just shagging everything, basically.
Pretty much, yeah. 4,500 calories was their maintenance, right? And these are like big strapping Neanderthals, right? Mm. This is definitely incorrect. But how funny is this, right? They drew a comparison of a Neanderthal and a modern Homo sapien. And they were basically saying like a trained Homo sapien now, so a powerlifter, like a really strong guy could bench like 180 kilos. They think that a Neanderthal untrained would bench 220 kilos.
So just an average bloke walking around,
literally just 220 kilos untrained, right? Which is obviously just some sort of like, they don't know bench press, they don't know training and all this sort of stuff. Yeah. Can't say a Neanderthal could bench 220 kilos. But it just showcased like the strength that they had. And basically they would have to like carry like a 30 kilo kill for like 40 kilometers, and like run with it and stuff, which is why they adapted to have like this lung capacity and all this sort of shit, right? And I was like, that's mental. They're literally like an advanced species to us. So then you look at like, you look at like that with this like video going through like Neanderthals. And then you say about like male aggression. Think of the aggression they would have to kill like a woolly mammoth. Do you know what I mean? Like going through like the skin of a woolly mammoth, manufacturing their own like spears, potentially every day putting their life in danger, getting hunted or getting killed from hunting. Like that is going to build a lot of like aggression and almost like, you know, a very like manly man will say, you know, and then think of like how we've like evolved as humans and Homo sapiens now, whereas like we don't hunt, we go to Tesco, and like the life has changed like so much and it's so accessible. It's like you don't need to have like all this aggression, and then we create sports to sort of exercise those sort of like things in men and women, you know, to express yourself. So it's like, I agree. I think we are becoming like less aggressive, but I think it's probably just the general evolution of humans. It's just like not really required. We're not hunter-gatherers anymore. We're shopping at Tesco. So it's like, it's sort of like changing in that way.
Yeah, pussies.
Yeah,
basically, we're such pussies now.
Yeah, exactly.
I think that's probably quite a nice question to lead us into a question that I've got for you for this podcast. And it was a question that a friend asked me on New Year's Day. And it was, when it comes to, say, the top 100 powerlifters in the world, strength athletes, what percentage is nature and what percentage is nurture?
What, as in like genetically?
So nature being, so
genetic potential.
And I guess what how powerful their DNA is to be good at a specific sport, in this case, strength sport. And then how much of that percentage then is nurture. So the argument that we had, I think most people know who Lionel Messi was. Do you know who Lionel Messi is?
Yeah. Luckily.
So the argument that we had was, if you say took the average Joe and gave him all the training that Messi had up until he was 16 years old, but then you had Messi and then you just gave him a football at 16 years old, would he still have been a professional footballer and one of the best football players ever to live if he hadn't have had that, say, 13 years of playing with a football, of running, of being spatially aware?
Yeah.
Or did that happen through the nurture from what maybe his dad taught him, his coaches taught him?
Yeah. Do you want me to answer Messi's thing, or do you want me to do strength?
Yeah, let's go with Messi's first, and then we can then go into strength. Yeah.
So I think a lot of like Messi's development would be like the exposure of the coaching to then get him more psychologically into the sport, and then go from there. If you just remove that completely, like the coaching and the sort of exposures to like being involved in a team and stuff, maybe he wouldn't develop those qualities at a young age to actually be that into football. If he didn't have that and you just gave him a football and said kick that around, maybe he'd still love it and enjoy it and develop some skills, but he's definitely not going to develop it as much as if he's going to be coached, which is pretty obvious. And I suppose the answer to the question is like, how much of him being involved in a team, being involved with coaching, actually then unlocks more of his like potential in terms of like talent than if he just didn't have that. So the talent is there, like the nurture is always going to be there, but you need to express it. And this is like how much of that actually gets it expressed. Obviously a lot. That's the whole reason why you practice and get coached and stuff. But if he didn't have that, would he still have the level of engagement? You know, from there. And if you remove that completely and just say like, if you just give him a football and he just practiced, I'd probably say no. What do you think? It's fucking hard.
We then got quite deep, and we were like, well, if you think of like how humans have evolved, if you think of a footballer in general, it's not just kicking a ball. It's the athleticism that comes with it. It's the being able to move fast, to be agile, to be able to jump high, all of those things. And if you look them back through, if you had looked at his DNA, I think I saw a statistic the other day, we get it up, but our DNA strands run like, if you took our DNA strands, I can't remember, but it would be so long.
Yeah.
So I think that all of that strand comes from potentially thousands, hundreds of thousands of years ago.
Yeah.
So all of these people that have come before, say you, myself, we have got a bit of them in us. So if they say someone is really fast, say they would have been, say, the person back in the day who was hunting, who was really good at avoiding saber-toothed tigers.
Yeah.
You know, so I think all of those things added up then leads to a person.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes when that person then is born and all of those things come together and they create like a superhuman, like a Messi, or a superhuman like someone who is just super, super strong. Like I'm trying to think of a powerlifter, someone who's just incredibly strong. There's a good chance that their dad, their granddad,
100%.
them before were also very, very strong.
Yeah, no, 100%.
So again, it's a tough question. Like how much of, say, you could probably use Eddie Hall as an example. Like how much?
I think like with Eddie Hall, he had that like Hercules gene, didn't he? So have you heard about that?
No, never heard.
Oh yeah, there's like this gene expression where it's like the Hercules gene, where he's just like basically just really naturally strong. And if you look at him growing up, like Eddie Hall at 16 looks like 30.
And The Rock, the size of him.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So they have that genetic predisposition to be like that, providing that they train it and exercise it. They're always going to be somewhat strong, but then if they pursue it, they're going to adapt real quick. And to answer the question with powerlifters, like I'm pretty certain that like the top percentage of powerlifting is pretty much just like all genetic, because it's not just genetic in strength, it's also like genetic in like injury resilience. Like some of the best powerlifters in the world are the best powerlifters in the world because they're really strong genetically. They train hard because if you're genetically strong, generally you have that mindset that is just different to the average person, where you're just going to be really pushing hard. And they want it, and they have like a different wiring. Like Colton, who Thomas coaches, is like, doesn't idolize anyone. He just sees a number and he's like, I'm just going to get better than it. And it's like genuine. That's not made up. Like he actually thinks that. Whereas I'll say to myself, like, yeah, no idols. Well, I pretty much do. I'm like, oh, this guy's like Nicholas Dupria from South Africa. I was like, oh, I'd love to look like him. So it's like, I do have that, you know, I'm not quite as elite as like these like top bracket lifters. So like when you got that genetic predisposition, you have that mentality to push really, really hard. You have that injury resilience. You do just climb the ranks much better. So in terms of like a percentage split, I'd say like the top like 50% will all train hard. So like the nurture is built into their nature. And I feel like, yeah, like unless you've got that like genetic potential, you'll always have like smaller progressions like with your training. So I don't know how to split it into a percentage, but the top bracket of lifters are pretty much all genetically blessed. Yeah. No one's like skinny fat and like, you know, not have that much muscle and like find it really hard to gain muscle, because muscle moves weight and they need the muscle to lift heavy weight. And if they just can't quite get that going, they're not going to be that elite. You can work really hard, of course, to get the most that you can. But sometimes like work doesn't just equal outcome. There's always going to be like people that like potentially work a little bit like less hard than you, but do have better genetics and will progress more, you know, and that's not like a cop out or like an exit. I think that's just the reality of like humans doing, you know, this endeavor. Yeah.
No, it makes sense.
Because otherwise it'd be like if we just got like Adam by there to go on to like the most elite training split and follows the exact same program as like John Hack. It's like you know, like obviously John Hack's here, Adam's sorry mate, pretty much down here. But if they did the exact same thing all the time, John Hack would still just adapt better because he just has that like genetic sort of predisposition to adapt better to these stimuluses.
And then last question, yes or no answer, is a rock on steroids?
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Cheers, mate.
Hope you enjoyed that. It's, hopefully the audio has been okay. I think it will be my best in there.
Yeah, we'll get better. We'll get better ones in the next one as we get like 3 viewers.
Yes.
We'll upgrade.
5.
Yeah.
Thanks for your time. Thanks for listening, and see you in the next one.
See ya.